talking about here on my channel right now. It's all about Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively's
HI Besties. Welcome to Coravanta with Sardar Zuriat Abbas Khan Lashari. Today we should discuss about Blake Lively's movie flops while Justin Baldoni drama heats up, and the way Hollywood, the fans, and the media are tearing this story apart has turned what was supposed to be a lighthearted rom-com release into one of the most embarrassing PR disasters of her career, because the situation is no longer just about whether or not audiences enjoyed the film, but rather about how this failure exposes deeper cracks in Blake Lively's public image, her calculated career moves, and the unresolved, burning feud with Justin Baldoni that has been bubbling under the surface for months, with every headline, every tweet, and every fan comment adding fuel to a scandal that shows no signs of slowing down. As the movie that was marketed as a charming, feel-good romantic comedy meant to cement Blake's box office credibility as a leading woman outside of franchises or ensemble casts instead, crashed and burned in record time, receiving brutal reviews from critics who accused it of being lazy, formulaic, and painfully outdated, while fans on social media roasted it with memes, threads, and ruthless takedowns that turned opening weekend into a public humiliation, leaving Hollywood insiders whispering about how a star who once prided herself on being untouchable and universally adored could miscalculate this badly, and more importantly, why the drama surrounding Justin Baldoni has made the entire ordeal even worse, dragging the flop into territory that is not just cinematic failure but full-blown celebrity scandal, because for weeks leading up to the release, Blake Lively's PR team worked overtime to distance her from Baldoni, painting her as the wronged party in their behind-the-scenes fallout, spinning stories that emphasized her independence, her creative control, and her focus on building a filmography that had nothing to do with his projects. Yet the timing of everything suggests the opposite, since the collapse of this movie's reputation has coincided perfectly with Justin Baldoni's resurgence in the headlines, where he has been quietly but effectively repositioning himself as a thoughtful filmmaker, a victim of Hollywood politics, and even a sympathetic figure in the ongoing legal and PR mess that has pitted him against Blake. And as much as her team tries to deny it, the optics are devastating, because audiences love a narrative, and the narrative right now is not Blake Lively, the glamorous actress delivering a rom-com triumph, but Blake Lively, the fading star stumbling through a flop while the man she spent months trying to discredit looks like he's finally gaining the upper hand. And the cruelty of Hollywood is that once fans smell blood in the water, they turn savage, and that's exactly what has happened, with TikTok edits mocking the movie's awkward dialogue, Twitter threads breaking down every cliché-ridden scene, Letterboxd reviews calling it the death of the rom-com, and YouTube commentators gleefully compiling clips of Blake's most over-the-top moments as proof that her performance was more parody than sincerity, while at the same time, Baldoni's defenders are using the flop as ammunition, claiming that this is karma for the way she allegedly undermined him during their fallout, pointing out that while he may not have had the most commercially successful career, his projects at least carried a sense of heart and originality that this film sorely lacked, and that comparison has stuck, because even neutral viewers who went into the rom-com with no knowledge of the drama came out talking about how generic and soulless it felt, leading many to conclude that Blake Lively's brand of carefully polished perfection simply doesn't translate when the script, the chemistry, and the direction aren't strong enough to support her, which in turn raises the question, was this really a misstep in material, or was it a larger miscalculation of her own star power, inflated by years of media adoration, high-profile fashion appearances, and carefully curated social media posts, but never truly tested in the brutal, fickle arena of solo box office draws? Because if this movie was supposed to be her chance to prove that she could carry a project on her name alone, the numbers tell a sobering story, with box office projections that started in the respectable mid-range collapsing by nearly 60% after the first weekend, streaming interest plateauing almost immediately, and international markets showing even less enthusiasm, effectively branding the film as not just a disappointment, but a flop. And in Hollywood, a flop at this scale is more than just a failed project. It's a signal, a warning flare that changes how studios, producers, and even fans view the star involved. And for Blake, who has spent years cultivating an image of flawlessness, the timing couldn't be worse, because she is not only facing professional embarrassment but also the public's growing suspicion that her behind-the-scenes maneuvers with Justin Baldoni may have played a role in creating this toxic narrative storm. as entertainment blogs, gossip podcasts, and even mainstream outlets have begun to connect the dots, speculating that the very drama her team tried to bury has resurfaced with vengeance, with whispers of leaked emails, strained professional relationships, and the possibility that Baldoni himself, either directly or indirectly, may have benefited from the collapse of her film's reputation, fueling a storyline where he emerges vindicated while she looks desperate, defensive, and diminished, and while some die-hard fans continue to defend her online, insisting that the movie is cute or underrated. Their voices are drowned out by the sheer volume of criticism, as trending hashtags mock the film's dialogue, its recycled plot lines, and even its marketing campaign, which was criticized as tone-deaf and overly reliant on Blake's fashion choices rather than the substance of the movie itself. And when even the film's own cast members seem distant in their promotion, with awkward interviews circulating where co-stars dodge questions about chemistry and critics' reviews, it only deepens the sense that Blake has been left exposed, shouldering the blame for a flop that was supposed to be her victory lap. And this is where the Justin Baldoni dramatize in most brutally. Because Hollywood thrives on perception, and the perception now is that the woman who once seemed untouchable has stumbled badly, while the man she was locked in conflict with looks increasingly like he might survive, or even thrive, and this reversal of fortune is precisely what makes the story irresistible to fans and media alike, because it's not just about a bad movie, it's about hubris, rivalry, and the spectacle of watching a carefully maintained image unravel. And as the weeks go on, the story only escalates, with new angles emerging almost daily, from think pieces about the death of the rom-com genre, to conspiracy theories about whether Baldoni's camp deliberately timed leaks to coincide with Blake's release, to industry insiders debating whether she can recover from this flop or whether this marks the beginning of a decline, and all of it is playing out in real time on every platform in every headline, making this not just a cinematic failure but a cultural event, the kind of Hollywood train wreck that people can't look away from. And for Blake Lively, the challenge now is not only how to spin this disaster into something survivable, but whether the audience that once adored her is even willing to listen, because right now all they want to do is roast, meme, and remind her brutally that in Hollywood, nobody is untouchable forever. The fallout from Blake Lively's rom-com flop, while the Justin Baldoni drama heats up, has now entered a new and even more chaotic phase, because as the dust from opening weekend settled, instead of things calming down or critics softening their stance, the backlash snowballed, with every detail of the film's failure becoming a talking point that fed into the larger Hollywood narrative about Lively's supposed decline and Baldoni's unexpected rebound. And the way the media has latched onto this story almost feels orchestrated, as if the universe itself wanted to underline the irony of a star once celebrated for her impeccable timing now suffering the worst timing imaginable, with an industry already skeptical of rom-coms declaring this flop the final nail in the coffin of a genre that has been limping along for years. And the cruel twist is that Blake had positioned herself as the one to revive it, branding the movie as a classic love story for a new generation, only to have fans mock it as nothing more than a recycled Hallmark Channel script with a bigger budget and fancier wardrobe, which has left her image battered not only in terms of box office credibility but also in terms of authenticity, because audiences don't just want stars anymore. They want sincerity, and every meme, every thread, every TikTok pointing out how artificial the film felt only reinforces the idea that Blake herself is more style than substance, while Justin Baldoni, whose own projects have been accused of sentimentality in the past, suddenly benefits from the comparison, with fans claiming that even if his films are too emotional, at least they feel genuine, and this subtle but powerful shift in perception is what makes this moment so dangerous for Blake, because Hollywood doesn't forgive easily, and once an actress gets branded as fake or over, it's nearly impossible to shake. And the fact that this is all happening while Baldoni's name trends alongside hers only deepens the wound, as industry insiders speculate whether he's been intentionally quiet to let the narrative work in his favor, or whether he's been quietly feeding stories to blogs through his team to ensure that Blake takes the full brunt of the public shaming. And while no one can prove anything, the timing of certain leaks, like an anonymous source claiming that Blake clashed with directors on set, or whispers that she overruled script edits to showcase herself more prominently, makes it seem like the knives are out and fans are eating it up, turning what could have been a forgettable flop into a saga of ego, rivalry, and betrayal. And the longer Blake's PR team waits to address it directly, the worse it gets, Because silence in Hollywood isn't seen as strength anymore. It's seen as guilt, and already her Instagram posts, once flooded with adoration, are filled with snarky comments and sarcastic hashtags referencing the flop, while Baldoni's supporters flood his mentions with encouragement, painting him as the bigger man for staying above the drama. A narrative that may or may not be true but works brilliantly for him regardless, and behind closed doors, the stakes are even higher, because reports suggest that streaming platforms are now hesitating on greenlighting Blake's future projects, worried that her name doesn't guarantee clicks the way it once did, and even fashion houses, which have long relied on her red carpet appearances for buzz, are rumored to be reconsidering contracts, afraid that being too closely associated with a fading star could damage their own prestige, which leaves Blake in the most precarious position of her career. Still famous enough to be a headline, but famous for the wrong reasons, and every move she makes from here on out will be scrutinized, judged, and weaponized against her in the ongoing PR war that she seems to be losing to Justin Baldoni, whose career may not be thriving in the traditional sense, but who now looks like he's playing the long game, positioning himself not as a blockbuster name but as a survivor. A man who withstood Hollywood politics, smear campaigns, and professional setbacks, and came out with his dignity intact, while Blake, the supposed golden girl, now looks desperate, defensive, and fragile, and the irony of this reversal is not lost on fans, who continue to spin conspiracy theories about how deep this feud actually goes, with some speculating that Baldoni and his camp intentionally sabotaged her film's rollout by leaking negative test screening reactions, while others argue that Blake herself set this up by trying too hard to outshine him and inadvertently drawing more attention to the very feud she wanted buried. And while the truth may never fully come out, what matters in Hollywood is perception. And right now the perception is that Blake Lively, once untouchable, has fallen hard, while Baldoni has risen by simply doing nothing. And this is what makes the entire saga so compelling to the public, because it's no longer about the movie. It's about watching an image unravel in real time, about watching the mechanics of celebrity come undone, and about questioning whether stars like Blake, who built careers on careful curation, can survive in an era where authenticity, vulnerability, and relatability mean more than glamour, perfection, and polish. And as the weeks stretch into months, this drama refuses to die, because every podcast episode dissecting the flop, every late-night joke about the rom-com's disastrous reception, every meme that goes viral comparing Blake's overacted scenes to Baldoni's earnest filmmaking, all of it breathes new life into the narrative, keeping it alive and making it harder for her to move on. And in Hollywood, when a scandal refuses to fade, it becomes part of your brand, which is exactly what Blake Lively doesn't want, yet exactly what she's getting, a permanent stain on her reputation that no PR spin can wash away, unless she finds a way to flip the narrative dramatically. But for now, the reality is brutal. Blake Lively's movie flopped, her feud with Justin Baldoni is still heating up, and the world is watching, dissecting, and mocking every second of it. Because in this industry, nothing is more entertaining than a star's fall from grace.
I don't think I relate to any of my characters. I've played a crack addict from Boston. I've played an Upper East Side princess.
Blake Lively's movie flops while Justin Baldoni drama heats up, and the Hollywood machine has been shaken to its core because what was supposed to be a feel-good romantic comedy comeback turned into one of the most brutal takedowns of a star's image in recent years. And instead of audiences walking out of theaters gushing about her charm, social media turned the release into a global roast, a non-stop meme fest that transformed the project into a public humiliation and exposed the vulnerability of even the most carefully curated celebrity brands. Because Blake Lively had spent years positioning herself as not only a glamorous red carpet fixture but also a serious creative force, and this movie was marketed as her statement piece, her moment to prove that she could revive the dying rom-com genre. But from the very first reactions it became clear that the attempt was failing spectacularly, with critics blasting the film as a hollow exercise in style over substance, audiences mocking its cliched plot, awkward pacing, and lifeless dialogue, and fans posting viral edits comparing it unfavorably to streaming originals that cost a fraction of the budget. And all of this might have been survivable had it not collided directly with the ongoing drama involving Justin Baldoni, a feud that has become impossible to ignore, because every headline about the flop is now framed in the context of her war with him, every late-night joke doubles as a dig at her credibility, and every fan thread Analyzing the collapse circles back to the suspicion that her rivalry with Baldoni has poisoned her professional reputation, raising the stakes of what could have been an ordinary box office disappointment into a career-defining scandal, because what audiences and Hollywood insiders see is not just a bad film, but a story of ego, rivalry, and downfall, and that is a narrative far more captivating than the movie itself. The roots of this disaster stretch back months, long before opening weekend, when Blake's PR team, sensing that the Baldoni feud threatened to overshadow her work, launched a subtle but aggressive campaign to paint her as independent, in control, and thriving, while reducing Baldoni to a footnote. But the problem with trying to bury Hollywood drama is that fans love nothing more than to dig it back up, and when rumors started circulating that the movie had performed poorly in test screenings, conspiracy theories spread like wildfire, with some claiming Baldoni's camp leaked the reactions to sabotage her, while others suggested Blake herself had overruled creative decisions on set to ensure she got more screen time, leading to tensions with the director and cast. And whether or not any of these stories are true doesn't matter anymore, because in the court of public opinion, perception is reality, and the perception is that this was a vanity project gone wrong, where Blake Lively overplayed her hand and ended up with a flop that confirmed her critics' worst suspicions. By the time the movie hit theaters, the narrative was already poisoned, and when the numbers came in, they told a brutal story. Box office projections slashed in half after the opening weekend, streaming platforms showing minimal pickup, international markets ignoring it entirely, and critics competing to see who could deliver the sharpest insult, with reviews calling it a rom-com without romance or comedy, a career misstep dressed as couture, and the kind of film that makes you miss even the cheesiest early 2000s love stories. And fans echoed the sentiment online, with hashtags mocking her performance trending on TikTok, sarcastic letterboxd reviews gaining thousands of likes, and YouTube commentators breaking down the most awkward moments scene by scene, turning the film into unintentional comedy for an audience more interested in roasting it than enjoying it. And in the midst of all this chaos, Justin Baldoni's name kept resurfacing, because while he remained largely silent, his defenders were loud, framing the flop as karma for how Blake allegedly tried to undercut him during their fallout, arguing that his films, however sentimental, carried sincerity and originality, while hers exposed the hollowness of her carefully maintained brand, and the comparison stuck, because sincerity versus artifice is a battle audiences instinctively respond to, and Blake came out on the losing end. Hollywood is unforgiving when it smells weakness, and the ripple effects of the flop were immediate. Insiders leaked that streaming platforms were hesitating on future deals with her, producers started questioning her bankability, and even fashion houses, once her safest territory, were rumored to be reevaluating contracts, afraid of attaching their prestige to a star whose relevance was being torn apart online, and for someone like Blake, whose entire career was built on the image of being untouchable, stylish, and flawless. The collapse was not just professional but deeply personal, because the very qualities she once used to elevate herself are now the ones being mocked, with fans deriding the movie's over-reliance on her wardrobe and image rather than story and substance. A criticism that bleeds directly into her public persona, leaving her with no escape. Meanwhile, Baldoni, whether through strategy or luck, has benefited enormously from saying almost nothing, because silence has allowed the narrative to crown him the bigger man, the victim of Hollywood politics who rose above the mudslinging while Blake drowned in it, and whether or not he orchestrated any leaks, the timing of certain stories. Anonymous claims of Blake's on-set clashes.
I don't think I relate to any of my characters. I've played a crack addict from Boston. I've played an Upper East Side princess.
Rumors of script rewrites demanded by her team, whispers that co-stars felt sidelined, has led many to suspect his hand, and fans who already disliked her have been eager to believe it, spreading conspiracy theories across Reddit and Twitter that read like soap operas but feel believable because the pieces fit too perfectly. The more the movie flopped, the more these theories gained traction, until the entire saga became less about cinema and more about character, with Blake framed as the arrogant star undone by her own hubris, and Baldoni reframed as the survivor, not necessarily triumphant but validated, and in Hollywood perception is everything, which is why this flop is so devastating. It doesn't just hurt Blake Lively's box office credibility. It rewrites her story in the eyes of the public, transforming her from the golden girl who could do no wrong into a symbol of overreach and decline. And the most brutal part is that the memes, threads, and edits will outlast the movie itself, living forever online as cultural shorthand for a celebrity's downfall, making it almost impossible for her to move on without the shadow of this disaster following her. The longer the backlash lingers, the more it snowballs, because every late-night joke, every podcast dissecting the feud, every blog speculating about her next move, keeps the story alive. And in an era where narratives move at lightning speed, the fact that this one refuses to die is proof of how deeply it has resonated. Not because of the movie's quality, but because of what it represents. The fall of someone who seemed invincible, the exposure of cracks in a carefully constructed image, and the irresistible drama of a feud that has given fans a villain and a hero, regardless of whether either role is fair. For Blake, the question now is not just whether she can recover professionally, but whether the public will allow her to, because in Hollywood redemption is possible but only when audiences want it, and right now they seem far more entertained by her downfall than interested in her comeback. And unless she finds a way to radically shift the narrative, this flop may not be just a bump in her career but the turning point that defines it, the moment people look back on as the beginning of her decline, while Justin Baldoni, the man she once seemed ready to bury, emerges stronger than ever, not through triumph but through survival, proving once again that in the brutal theater of celebrity, it's not always the most talented or the most glamorous who win, but the ones who endured. Thanks for watching. Subscribe my channel, Coravanta, for more updates. BY besties.